Hello, my name is Dr. Doug Sedownik, or Dr. Doug, and welcome to my YouTube station. Here I talk about my work as a professor, an activist, an author, and a psychotherapist for about 30 years, trying to bring all of that vital, life-saving information from the academy and the consulting room to you at home so you can become your own best therapist and so you can live your best life. And maybe this can also help you consider therapy, refine your therapy, or most importantly, do your work at home. I wanted to talk about the two secrets that I consider to be the most important thing in terms of self-realization and waking up. And they have to do with, one, this idea that we are not alone inside. There are all kinds of other personalities and complexities or objects, that's how we call it in the profession, and that the ego, or the sense of I, is actually not alone, but is also probably merged with these other personalities. And number two, the best and most effective way outside of really having a good therapy connection and alliance is to draw and write and discuss and dialogue with those inner personalities, which C.G. Jung called active imagination. So I really want to talk about those two different pieces. One, that you are not alone inside, and two, it is possible to discuss and dialogue with those other complexities through writing, learning, reading, singing, dancing, and drawing, painting. And I'm going to show you some of my paintings that I've done over the last 30 years that I have never revealed before. And I'm also going to talk to you about an event that I'm doing this weekend. But before I do, I wanted to encourage you all to smash the like button and subscribe to hear more interesting lessons, lectures, do it at home, pieces from Dr. Doug, and also all of the events that I'm doing in the next few months that you're all invited to. Some of them will be through Zoom and others of them will be live. Just to give you a heads up, there's a live open mic event this Saturday, the 17th of June, from 5 to 7 p.m. If you're in Los Angeles. This is actually going to be in my home garden, so hit me up here or at my Gmail, askdrdugphd@gmail.com. That's ASKDR, no period, Doug, DOUG, PhD, @gmail.com for a free newsletter and also for any information about the events, especially the open mic. This Saturday, I'm hosting it with Peter DeWitt, who is part of gaywellness.com. Check him out if you want to be part of that network, www.gaywellness.com. And there's going to be a link in the description for that. So don't forget to subscribe to get more information about events and also important lessons and lectures about how to live your best life. So back to the two ideas that I wanted to talk to you today. That we're not alone inside, and that it's possible to develop those personalities through drawing and writing. This is really, really key. All my life I had this idea that I was actually not alone inside. There was somebody I'd call Little Doug, and then there was this vicious sort of homophobic inner attacker. There was this little feminine girl I called Nancy, and there was this very masculine, almost straight acting fellow with whom I was in some type of romantic connection, onto whom I projected people in my life with whom I decided I might or might not fall in love. And those people, as I learned how to do inner work and get more developed, I gave them names and learned how to, key term here, differentiate them from my conscious self. That kind of effort of differentiation, which takes a lot of work, but is so wonderful, is really, in my opinion, the very thing humanity needs to stave off its perilous march into global warming and AI disaster and nuclear war. Sorry to get a little dark here, but we're invited to raise up our level of consciousness to a whole new quantum level if we're going to survive. And in my opinion, while we're all perhaps marveling at and scared by AI, in my opinion, learning how to actually build up the inner personalities of your imagination is a much more powerful force to contend with, and we ought not to be so terrified if we can do the inner work. So I'm making it really super simple here. Let me see if I can ask you, If you want to do this at home, what would you say your inner personalities look like? I bet you may not have thought about it, or you may, because right now in general society the idea of inner child work is actually so valid and important, although people tend to maybe over sentimentalize the inner child or dismiss it as the kind of thing you might hear in Oprah. Not to diss Oprah, because Oprah serves a very important public service, but the inner child work tends sometimes to be dismissed, especially if you're a tough guy and you think you don't have an inner child. But if you're the least bit honest with yourself and you're in your car and there's somebody getting in your way, or you're at the grocery and some person in front of you is chit-chatting or flirting with the checkout person, and you're starving and you fucking want to get home as soon as possible, eat your goddamn tuna sandwich, and you're about to flip your lid, it might occur to you that that actually emotional explosion is coming from a much more young, immature, childlike, maybe even infantile place. Have you ever tantrumed? Have you ever said something you wish you hadn't? That is how you get to know what your complex is, or your inner child complex. Another kind of complex you could know about: have you ever heard yourself talk about yourself in the most nasty, demeaning, horrible, cold, calculating ways possible? It's probably not coming, that voice, that denigration, from your central ego. Personality in clinical psychology, the word ego is usually used to talk about actually something we want to grow. It's not how you think about it in the street as something where you're full of yourself. Believe it or not, ego in clinical psychology is actually rather hard to attain and has to do really with what is called mindfulness, or the good enough mother. That's another video. Check it out. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll make sure I'll get much more regular about sending you this important life-saving information. But if you could notice a little bit about how those inner voices that are quite denigrating are going, that could be called your inner attacker, or in Freudian terms, your super ego. It also might be useful to you the next time you are, sorry for sounding a little fresh here, maybe pleasuring yourself or having a fantasy about somebody whose picture you saw on Instagram. It might occur to you that actually that feeling is coming from an internal place, an internal figure, an archetypal power. That could also be called a personality, your inner beloved, or your inner lover. So you got the child, you got the inner attacker, you got the central ego personality, you got the parents, and you got the hot lover. All of a sudden you're starting to develop what could be called an inner family. You're starting to develop an inner family, how to let those folks live and breathe. Well, there's no opportunity in society as it's currently constructed to actually talk about these personalities without sounding as if you really need therapy and you have a freaking multiple personality disorder. That is not what we're talking about. We're not talking about you being psychotic and having a multiple personality disorder. This is not to dismiss or denigrate those people who are suffering from psychosis, or who indeed do have a multiple personality disorder. Those people also can be healed and also have a lot to teach us. In fact, the early beginnings of depth psychology, as far as C.G. Jung was concerned, started with the study of schizophrenia. That's how he learned that there were multiple personalities inside. Except that the schizophrenic often doesn't have a central ego in the way we do to mediate the relationship with those inner personalities. Whoa, I'm getting way too technical here. That's me becoming the best little Jewish boy in the world because my own parents didn't want me to be an actor and a singer. Here's a story. Except that the schizophrenic often doesn't have a central ego in the way we do to mediate the relationship with those inner personalities. Whoa, I'm getting way too technical here. That's me becoming the best little Jewish boy in the world because my own parents didn't want me to be an actor and a singer. Here's a story. They went backstage when I was belting it out, one of those summer camp musicals Jewish kids performed in, and I was just the best dancer and actor and singer. And my mother came back, I must have been 8 or 9 years old, backstage, and I thought she was going to give me a big hug. And instead she looked at me and she said, "None of this. You are going to be a doctor or a lawyer. No way, you are not going to pursue this." And I didn't have the strength, actually, at that point to stand up to her. Thank whatever goddess you want to say, that I actually had enough capacity to develop those parts of my mind that could be intellectual. That got me out of the Bronx, into the Ivy League. It also got me into a dead end. Anyway, I spent my whole life struggling between whether am I an artist or am I a scientist, because I then became a clinical psychology and I studied really hard and I trained really hard to be a really good therapist and psychoanalyst. You have to study for decades and be trained for decades and maybe in a way constrain your life to such an extent. It's only because I realized as I was turning 60 that I had to free myself from some of the institutional bounds and constraints that had limited me, and that led to this whole new rebirth and reunification of myself as both a therapist and a creator, as a scientist and an artist. It's so important to put those two aspects together, European Enlightenment and Romanticism, but I'm not going to get too heady right now. Let's get back to our focus, which is how can you start to work on developing your inner personality through learning about these figures. What does your baby look like and sound like? Think about this the next time you want to scream your head off at somebody. What does your inner attacker look like and sound like? Think about this the next time the voice comes into your mind and says, you are such a POS, or you are so fat, or you look so terrible, or what's wrong with you that you weren't productive enough today. People get confused with that voice. They think that voice is helpful, trying to get their asses off the couch. That's only because they haven't developed a powerful ego inner attacker relationship where that voice is mediated in a helpful way through the good enough mother or the central ego. So unfortunately, that voice does tend to make people initiate action, but it is not the best way. It is not the best way to get anything done in life, to be pushed around by your inner bully. It's much better if that volition and intentionality comes from the central personality, which can only take place, in my opinion, once a conscious and conscientious relationship between the ego and the inner attacker has taken place, which most of us haven't been taught how to do. That's why I'm making these videos. I think it's really, really important. Please develop a relationship with your inner attacker, like immediately, like do it today, like don't wait. Don't make anything else a priority. It's the most important freaking thing to do. Anyway, that's all I really wanted to say to get started here on the unification of art and science and the fullness of the idea of a new dispensation post the Christian Judaic myth of meaning and heteronormativity and all of those straitjackets that have kept human society in such a split and perilous and hating Mother Earth position. As we come to get more connected to who we are deep down inside in our various inner voices, that is then the initiation, in my opinion, at least in my humble opinion as Dr. Doug, of a true democracy, which can only actually take place inside. If we're not working on making democracy internally, what good is it going to be to try to make it happen on the outer world? Because our own inner fascism is going to manifest in the social world. That doesn't mean we have to not fight for democracy and democratic values politically, but I think that whole project will be much further expedited if we are making sure that we're at least standing up to our own inner attacker through conscious inner work and art making and drawing and writing. And this leads me to end this cool YouTube video by letting you know that I am finishing my book. I've been working on 3 or 4 books for the last 5 years since leaving a bunch of institutions, and finally I'm actually getting really connected to the novelistic memoir that is called Fractured Rainbows, something like that, a gay psychological novelistic memoir. I am going to be premiering the reading of that at the open mic that I was telling you about at the beginning of this YouTube, which is this Saturday from 5 to 7. You can come and hear me read about it. It's so cool. You can hear me talk about the way I have described the development of these inner personalities, including the very tumultuous birth that led to little Doug. The first chapter, which is called The Baby Will Fall Out of Your Vagina. You have to hear about it. Please don't forget to subscribe, because I will be dropping the first chapter in installments. I think installments next month, and I'll be reading from it at the open mic all of you people who live in Los Angeles who are artists and therapists and creatives, consider coming. Me and Peter DeWitt of gaywellness.com are going to be hosting that. It's this Saturday from 5 to 7. But if you want to find out more about what's going on and hear more about stuff, don't forget to write me at askdrdougphd@gmail.com to get the newsletter, which I trying to get out every week. It also has a weekly checklist of things that you might consider doing for your psychological and physical health. And I so appreciate you coming here. If you have done some work on developing your relationship to your inner baby or your inner attacker or any of your other personalities, please let me know. Write about it in the comments section. Email me. Let's have a longer conversation about it. Don't forget to ask me any questions you might have, and I look forward to hearing from you and seeing you in the next YouTube. Take care. Do your inner work. Take care of yourself. See you.